What's up, everyone? It's Jay. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Gritty Fantasy Football Podcast. We're back. It's been a while. I'm sorry. We haven't uploaded an episode in a while. I know I was talking about how, I've been told I have a soothing voice, I have a calming effect on people. I hope no one got any types of anxiety attacks or anything like that while I was gone. I guess I'll have to try and keep the episodes coming. But before I get into this episode, let me just talk about how I am a generational hater. I will hate on players, I will hate on sports teams for the most inconsequential reason. And I feel like a lot of sports fans are like this, and it's kind of funny, that's how it should be. But an example I'll give you guys is Derrick Henry, because I've been a Derrick Henry hater for so long. And it's not because of anything he did, it's just because I love Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb in his prime, do you guys know how good Nick Chubb was? He was putting up generational numbers. He was top 3 in NFL history in rushing yards per attempt before the injury. Nick Chubb was so good, and such a great guy, by the way, too. Just doesn't say anything. And I'd always say that he was the best running back in the league. And I will still stand on that take that Nick Chubb, pre-injury in his prime, was the best running back in the league. But a lot of people at the time would be like, what about Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry's doing this and that. Bro, what? Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry gets all these rushing attempts and is much less efficient. So I'd always be kind of hating on Derrick Henry because I thought he was overrated. And yeah, I would let the players I hate influence who I draft in fantasy. That's for sure a real thing. I'm sure our biases affect all of us. So let's talk about Jalen Hurts, because the Jalen Hurts hate is at an all-time high. And I get that he and the Eagles had somewhat of a down year last year, but I feel like the hate has gone a little bit overboard. I still think that Jalen Hurts is a pretty good quarterback. That one play where he got -4 fantasy points because he threw a pick and fumbled on the same play, yeah, that did a lot to damage his reputation. But I really didn't think that Jalen Hurts was that bad. And don't get me wrong, last year was definitely not great. His 19.1 fantasy points per game, that was the fewest he's averaged since he took over as a starter. And that was actually his first time averaging less than 20 points per game. But even so, even in his down year, he finished as a QB7 on a points per game basis. He wasn't out there winning you your league, but he wasn't giving you horrible production either. So let's talk about Jalen Hurts. It feels like I'm playing devil's advocate when I say this, but let me make the case for Jalen Hurts. But before I get into that specifically, I just want to bring up a quick discussion about value picks in fantasy drafts. And this is a pretty intuitive concept, so I don't want to over-explain it, but it's worth going over so we can understand why Jalen Hurts might be a good pick this year. And anytime you can find value in a pick, that's going to increase your chance of winning your league. And we can use the analogy of a lottery here. If your chance of winning the league is your net worth, and your pick is a lottery ticket, then your pick being a good pick would be like you hitting the lottery. So obviously, if you win the lottery, your net worth goes up by a lot. So you picking a good player would cause you to have a higher chance of winning your league. But there's also some stratification here. A first round pick is not the same value as a 12th round pick. A first round pick is if you were to buy most of the tickets for a lottery. You're buying a lot of tickets for this lottery. Sure, your chance of winning that lottery is high, but winning that lottery doesn't do much to add to your net worth. If you spend $950,000 on lottery tickets, you better hope that you hit that $1 million jackpot. In fantasy football terms, this is to say that when we draft a player as the wide receiver 1 overall, we need them to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall to get a return on our investment. Or we need them to outscore the amount of points we project them for. There's not a lot of room to outperform, but there's certainly room to underperform. That's kind of what people mean when they say you can't win your league with your first 2 picks, but you can definitely lose your league with your first 2 picks. And I'm not one to really frame things that way or frame things the way that everyone else would frame things, but there's a reason why people say that. There is some reasoning behind it. But when you draft someone in the 12th round, it's not the same investment. That's like spending $5 on the lottery ticket. Your chance of winning the lottery may not be that high, but if you do hit that lottery, your net worth goes up by a lot. So if you drafted BTJ as the wide receiver 50 his rookie year, him finishing as the wide receiver 4 is going to substantially increase your chance of winning your league. So the question we're left with is, how do we know how many tickets to buy for the lottery? If we want to strike a balance between having a decent return, but also having a decent chance of winning, how should we make that decision? And that's not really a problem for when you're drafting wide receivers, because you can draft them in the early rounds and the later rounds in the same draft. But for a position like quarterback in a redraft league, you don't ever really draft more than 1 or 2. So it's absolutely a consideration to have. And you can buy most of the lottery tickets, and you can maximize your chance of winning that lottery at the cost of your net gain. So that would be like spending a premium pick on Josh Allen. And don't get me wrong here, I'm never going to say that Josh Allen is a bad pick because that guy is probably the most consistent fantasy football player in like history. But when you're drafting him in the second and third round, you're sacrificing a premium wide receiver or a premium running back there. So it's not like there's no cost there. You need him to have that consistency to even give yourself a chance. Another strategy you could take is that you could buy a few tickets to the lottery. So that would be like drafting a couple of guys in the later rounds. And that's fine. But what if we took the middle strategy? What if we spent $600,000 on lottery tickets? We still have a high chance of winning the lottery without giving up as large of a chunk of the final prize. And to me, that approach is why Jalen Hurts, at cost, is a good quarterback to target. Ever since Lamar Jackson entered the league, we've gotten pretty good at understanding how rushing production contributes to fantasy quarterback production. And with that, we've been able to more reliably draft the quarterback position in our preseason ADP. There's a group of guys that we know are going to give us decent rushing production, so they tend to be the first few quarterbacks to get taken. And this group always includes Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, and now we have some of the newer guys like Jaden Daniels and Drake May. This year, by ADP, Jalen Hurts is the cheapest one. Depending on what platform you use, where he's being drafted varies. But amongst that group, he's always going the latest. He's a quarterback that's considered pretty reliable for fantasy production because of his rushing floor. But also, of the group of guys that are considered the same thing, he's the cheapest to acquire. And this isn't necessarily a Jalen Hurts specific strategy. It's more so just a general strategy that says to take the cheapest of the elite quarterbacks. So you can have that reliability while also having resources to take another position with a higher pick. You only need one quarterback, but you might need to start, depending on your format, 2 to 4 wide receivers or running backs. So you need a lot more of those guys to be giving you high-end production. And when you're drafting a quarterback later on, or at least not as high as some of the elite guys, then that frees up those picks to be taken for those premium positions. But also, if we look at Jalen Hurts specifically, it's not like he's a big long shot to reach an upside outcome. Jalen Hurts, across his last 5 seasons, has never finished as lower than QB7 on a points per game basis. 2 of those seasons, he's finished as top 2 at the position overall. And he's in an offensive signature play is to drag their QB across the goal line for touchdowns. Last year was certainly a down year, and that's what's fresh in everyone's minds, as it should be. But part of that is that his rushing numbers by all metrics were significantly down from what he's averaged across his career. So from 2021 to 2024, Jalen Hurts had 9.85 rush attempts per game, which dropped to 6.56 in 2025. That's a big drop off. That's over 3 attempts per game. And that translated to his production too, because in rush yards per game, he dropped from 44.82 to 26.31. And excluding his rookie year, where he wasn't a starter for most of the season, these numbers were significantly lower than any other single season of his career. And that's not to say that Jalen Hurts is washed now. It's to say that every season that Jalen Hurts has had as a starter, he's hit certain rushing benchmarks, except for one. So is it more reasonable to expect that the one season is the norm for Jalen Hurts, who's still in his prime, by the way, going forward? Or is it a better bet to assume that the larger body of work is the norm? If we were to bump up Hurts' rushing numbers from this past season to his average numbers as a starter, we would find that he missed out on 296.16 rushing yards this season, so just under 30 fantasy points. And if we take the attempts he missed out on and multiply it by his career rushing touchdown rate, we find that he missed out on about 4.257 touchdowns. So if we take these numbers and convert them to fantasy points, and we add them to his fantasy points from last season, we find that he would have finished as the QB2 overall. In only 16 games too, by the way. And maybe this isn't the most fair way to manipulate his points, since we added rushing production without taking away any passing production. Like, that's a fair criticism. This isn't a perfect approximation of anything. But the main point is that we shouldn't let a down year blind us to the high-end production that is well within Hurts' reach. It's really not that far off. The Eagles' offense seemed really out of sync last season, but they made a lot of new changes. They have a new offensive coordinator and a new pass-catching group. The offensive line is still projected to be one of the best in the league. What if the rushing production for Hurts resets back to what it's always been? I know that was a lot of words, so I'll just wrap it up by saying this. You can draft whoever you want to draft. and whenever you want to draft them. And even though I just spent like 10 minutes gassing up Hurts, I wouldn't go to any draft expecting only to draft him. We can't predict how our drafts are going to go. We don't know how the board is going to fall. So we should always be open-minded to changing strategy as we construct our roster. I just hope I can make you guys a little bit more open-minded to taking Jalen Hurts if that's how things go. I know he got -4 fantasy points on one play. I know last year the Eagles kind of seemed like a disaster. But Jalen Hurts is pretty good, and he's always been pretty good. So you can draft Jalen Hurts as the QB6, and he might finish as the QB6. Sure, that's not that crazy to imagine. But what if you draft Hurts as the QB6, and just like 2022, he finishes at the top of his position? Well then congratulations, you just kind of hit the lottery. That's all I have to say for now. I'm going to gritty on out of here, and I hope you have a gritty-tastic rest of your day.